is LBC from Global, leading Britain's conversation with Nick Ferrari at breakfast.
Yeah, good morning to you. It's 4 minutes after 9, Monday, February the 4th. Coming up later in the hour, if you are into home teaching, home educating your children, later today the Children's Commissioner will call for a register of all youngsters who are being schooled at home. There is a suggestion that as many as 80,000 are, quotes, lost, close quotes, in the system. That's later in the hour. Now, to start the hour, welcome to the studio, Conservative MP and, of course, prominent member of ERG, the European Research Group of the Conservative Party, and one of my colleagues here at LBC, Jacob Rees Mogg. Mr. Rees Mogg, I have to start with the news that broke over the weekend, although one has to say it was sort of trailed on Friday. The Nissan decision. Is this, and I know we haven't left yet, but is this what post-Brexit Britain will hold? Morning.
Good morning, Mr. Ferrari. Thank you, and it's a pleasure to be on your show again. Nissan is obviously serious, but the question is it related to Brexit? And as far as one can tell, Brexit is far from being the primary reason Nissan has made this decision. That the issue for many of the car manufacturers begins with diesel engines and the huge push that emanated, in fact, from the European Union to encourage people to buy diesel engines and discourage petrol engines. Car manufacturers set themselves up to make more diesel rather than petrol engines. People then discovered, well, actually they knew all along but didn't bother about it. It is a huge scandal, the diesel scandal. But people were informed about the particulates and the nitrous oxides that were poisoning people in our cities, actually shortening people's lives. And so the desire to buy diesel engines has changed. And with the emission zones coming in, people who have diesel engines that are only a few years old face being heavily penalised in cities across the country, not just in London. So demand for diesel engines has fallen. Government tax changes were introduced to make registering a new car more expensive, and that's hit demand for cars. The UK car industry has seen a decline, German car industry has seen a decline, and there's more for Jaguar Land Rover than for Nissan. Chinese demand has also fallen very heavily. So there are all sorts of issues specific to the car industry, and then Nissan has its own corporate governance issues, with its chairman having been in a Japanese prison waiting investigation for misdeclaring his own pay. And there are differences between Nissan and Renault, who have major shareholdings in each other. So Brexit is one of those, what I might call BBC answers, that all bad news is because of Brexit and all good news is in spite of Brexit. All Nissan has said is that the uncertainty around Brexit in the future hasn't helped, but that's not the main reason why they've done this.
Terry in Basildon is the first caller. Thank you, Mr. Rees Mogg. Terry in Basildon is the first caller, and you want to explore this a little bit further and talk about uncertainty. You're through to Jacob Rees Mogg. Go ahead, Terry. Morning to you.
Yes, it's turned into Project Fact, not Project Fear, isn't it? As they did agree to build this X-Trail in Sunderland, and they've now reversed that decision and building it in Japan, given that Japan has now got a nice new trade agreement with the EU also. So it obviously makes them weird leaving the EU, so it makes business sense to actually produce it in Japan, not in the UK, because business investment has gone down in the UK since this year by 0.5%.
The car will still, stay on the line, Terry, the car will still be built, Mr. Rees Mogg.
The car will still be built, but it will be built in Japan. But this is because demand has fallen. It's a lower level of demand, which makes a different business decision. It's based on changing business facts, not on Brexit, which is what the company itself has said. So, Terry, I think you're going much further than Nissan itself is willing to go.
Terry, I'll bring you back in. Terry?
But if they're looking down the road of their investment, where they're going to put their money, and they want certainty. They've got uncertainty at the moment because they don't know what they're going to be trading under. WTO rules doesn't exactly explain much because we don't really know what level of WTO we've got. We've got the worst case scenario of WTO.
Well, we do know what WTO rules are, actually. Yes. That the worst case under WTO is that there would be a 10.2% tariff on cars made in the United Kingdom, which is the common external tariff implemented by the European Union, which, as it happens, is a lower level of tariff than the fall in the pound since we voted to leave the European Union. And it would make no difference to components because there's a specific exemption for components that are not taxed in the process of building a car. The end car is taxed. So WTO is quite clear. People know what that is. It's something they can factor into their calculations. But the truth is, business is all about uncertainty. The uncertainty that the car companies got wrong was the diesel uncertainty, that they all rushed to diesel. The German car manufacturers, particularly Volkswagen, fiddled their emissions figures to encourage diesel even further, helped by the European Union. That's the real business uncertainty in this and in the whole car industry, coupled with increasing tax rates that were imposed a couple of years ago in the UK for new car registrations.
Quick one sentence from you, Terry, then I must move on. Terry?
We do need certainty, because if I run a plumbing and heating business and I invest in certainty, I know what the cost is going to be to me, so when I work out the cost, we've got a zero tariff access to the biggest single market in the planet, and then we're leaving that and we're going to have costs applied. So therefore, if I want to invest and put money into a company, and where am I going to locate it and what products I'm going to produce, they're going to add a cost to it. So my bottom line is just increased. It's simple as that.
Well, it hasn't necessarily, and there's no certainty in business. The whole art of business is trying to manage uncertainty. Investment decisions aren't made for certain facts. You can't be certain that anyone is going to buy your car when you've built it. All business is based on uncertainty and managing uncertainty. And what we will know once we've left is the basis on which we're trading with the European Union in the future. And that may be the WTO, it may be a free trade agreement, and that will be settled in these negotiations. But leaving the EU is a vote for democracy.
Terry, I know you've more to say, but I must move on. Other people need to have their say. Jason in Ellesmere Port. Jason, you're through to Jacob Rees Mogg. Go ahead.
Good morning. Can I ask, Jacob, has the time come now to end asking the EU for concessions on the deal currently being offered, and to now accept that a no-deal exit is the most likely outcome, and instead of giving the EU 39 billion and getting nothing in return, use the 39 billion to help support the people and businesses of the UK during the transition period?
And Jason Stone, I just remind everybody, of course, you did vote, if I've got it right, you voted in support of what's called the Brady Amendment last week, Mr. Rees Mogg, which does send the PM back to Brussels.
Yes, Jason, I think you make a very fair point. And if this were entirely up to me and there were a Brexit majority in the House of Commons, I would be absolutely backing what you're saying. I would say, let's not pay our 39 billion, let's leave and move to WTO terms on the 29th of March and then make our own way. Unfortunately, the arithmetic in the House of Commons is that such a proposal is very unlikely to get through, is very likely to face obstacles, and the Yvette Cooper amendment, which failed by 23 votes, was essentially an attempt to stop Brexit. There are a group of MPs who are trying very, very hard to stop Brexit, never wanted it in the first place. In spite of how their constituents voted, they want to see it ended. And I think this is a very high risk. So if it's possible to get a compromise through Parliament that leaves the UK in a favourable situation, then I think it is worth compromising to ensure that we leave. And over the longer term, £39 billion, yes, it's a ransom that we are paying for our freedom, but the value that we will get from being free and being able to make our own decisions, our own business choices, it will be money well spent. So, Jason, I hope that explains why I'm willing to make this compromise, but I agree with you that leaving without a deal is a perfectly rational decision to make.
You'll back the withdrawal agreement, would you, if the backstop were to be replaced?
If the backstop were replaced with broadly what the Malthouse Compromise has proposed, which is essentially a free trade agreement based on existing processes. A lot of people have been talking about new technologies. Nothing to do with new technology. It's using existing processes in place around the world. Then yes, I could swallow with some reluctance the rest of the withdrawal agreement.
Right. But you're not rejecting leaving without a deal?
No, of course not. I'd be quite happy to leave without a deal.
Yes. But you've got the weight of the Commons behind you. This is your problem.
That's right. And there's been an outbreak of unity in the Conservative Party, and I'm working with people like Nicky Morgan to ensure that we leave with a deal, because they are very concerned about that, and they have genuine concerns. They're not fake concerns about that.
And do you think, Jason, back to you, do you sense the ERG is with you on this?
The ERG wants us to leave the European Union. That's our biggest aim. And we want to have a functioning Conservative government, which we believe is in the national interest. And that if we can unite the party, have a strong government, and leave the European Union, then that would be a satisfactory outcome. But if by accident we leave without a deal, because the Prime Minister doesn't run with this or the EU refuses it, then so be it.
Quick response from you, Jason.
Yeah, I agree entirely what you're saying. I do feel that if this had been perhaps the message coming from the UK government from quite a while ago that we were preparing for contingency plans for a no-deal exit, and that the government had kind of said, we've got your backs, guys. If this was to be the outcome, this is what the plan is to support you during potentially a little rocky period for a short period of time. That message, surely the EU would have taken that more seriously, and the threat that the EU was giving, that they were potentially looking at a no-deal exit, surely would have made perhaps the offer and the deal that they would have made back to us, I would feel would be better.
Response from you,
Jason, I think you're absolutely right. I think that if the government had made it clear from day one, pretty much from June 2016, that we were preparing to leave without a deal, and that was our default position, the EU would have been a more rational negotiator and would not have tried to win every point. I think the government in its negotiations has been divided. It's interesting that when you look at the government, the Parliamentary Party and the Conservative Party and voting base, the higher up the pyramid you go, the more pro-European it is. So at the top of the Tory party, you've got a large number of Remainers. As you move into Parliament, you've got many more Leavers. As you move to our members and voters, you've got an overwhelming number of Leavers. And unfortunately, there's been a disjunction over this negotiating period between the top of the Tory party and its base.
Jason, thank you. Kimmy in Glasgow, you're through to Jacob Rees Mogg. Go ahead, Kimmy.
Hiya. Hello, Jacob.
Hello, Kimmy.
Hi. I was thinking that maybe it's best for Theresa May and the Conservative. It's not my want, really, but I think it's better that Theresa May has a general election as soon as possible before Brexit.
Why would that be in a sentence, Kimmy?
It would be because I think that post-Brexit, I think that economically the country will suffer for what's going to happen, and to secure any kind of power that she's going to have, she'll need to get it over and done with quickly.
Jacob Rees Mogg.
Well, Kimmy, what I'd ask you is how many elections do you want that you don't win? Because we had now a general election in 2015 proposing a referendum, the referendum which voted to leave, and a general election in 2017 where both main parties said they would respect the result of the referendum. So why should we have another referendum just because the Remain side lost?
It's not so much I'm not supporting a dog in this fight or a particular party. However, Theresa May has not got a secure mandate because she's got a minority government supported by the DUP, and she's making a very crucial and devastating decision. And this needs to be ratified. And I believe there's a good reason to have a general election to actually secure it.
Well, it's been ratified 3 times. I just don't think you need another election. I think this is all about trying to stop Brexit by people who by and large never liked it in the first place.
Kimmy, thank you. There's also this idea of a sort of People's Council, or an idea that 100 citizens good and true will be selected, presumably at random, a bit like jury service, and they will help break the deadlock. You must have heard of this idea. What do you make?
I have, yes. It's all very nice and cosy. Perhaps they can do some knitting whilst they're about it. We have a representative democratic system. We had a referendum on this issue because it was of overwhelming constitutional importance. I don't see that you really need to have a sort of love-in to try and decide Brexit policy.
Kimmy, thanks for your call. What of this broader story that this does seem to be, and you'll know this expression, if you need a Sunday for Monday, which is a journalist term, you need to get a story away and there's not much happening. A regular Sunday for Monday is that we've got a general election on the way, or even a Saturday for Sunday, it has to be said sometimes. Jacob Rees Mogg, are you picking up that the Conservative Party is moving into election mode?
The Conservative Party is very reluctant to have an election after what happened at the last election. The last election was badly run, it was a bad manifesto and a poor campaign. And the next election's due at 2022, and I think people are quite happy to wait until 2022. There's no desire for one, and a lot of these stories seem to ignore the Fixed Term Parliament Act, that the Prime Minister either has to lose 2 votes of confidence on a simple majority, or win a 2/3 majority of all MPs, not just of those voting, to get a new general election. And I don't think many Conservative MPs would vote for a new general election.
Thank you. Joanna in Hemel Hempstead. You're through to Jacob Rees Mogg. Go ahead, Joanna.
Oh, good morning.
Good morning, Joanna.
Mr. Rees Mogg, I wondered what your thoughts were on the group of MPs that I think John Mann was one of the main ones, that is prepared to vote with the government, although that's not their initial vote. They're going to change their vote for a financial incentive to their constituency. Isn't that bribe? But technically, isn't that a bribe, really? I mean, Theresa May's already got 4 with the DUP, but I can't believe that's... it certainly puts a bad light on the MP's integrity.
Stay on the line, Joanne.
Well, John Mann is a person of great integrity and represents his constituents who voted significantly to leave and has supported the government in a number of votes in the House of Commons because he's delivering on what his electorate wants. And I think John has a very good understanding of what people in Bassett Law want. He's very much part of his community, though for the record I would vote Conservative if I lived in Bassett Law, much I think highly of John. I don't think pork barrel politics has a place in the UK. I think
Are we witnessing it now?
I hope not. I mean, I was a bit surprised by these stories. It's not how British government normally works, and the DUP...
If it got you your Brexit, though, you and your colleagues, is that a price worth paying?
The DUP money was actually slightly less than it had got in the previous 5 years, so people got very excited about that, but that was just firming up a commitment that was slightly lower than had been there in the past. I think to start giving lots of money in individual constituencies, as happens in the United States, completely commonplace in the United States, and a congressman who didn't get some pork for his constituency would not be thought of as a very good congressman, is something we're best without in this country.
But if it got you your Brexit?
Oh, no, we'll get Brexit anyway. The people voted for it.
OK, Joanna, quick response from you.
I'm still not very happy about the financial incentives. It's taxpayers' money, and as we've heard recently, there's children getting old-fashioned diseases about. There's a lot of malnutrition even.
There is, but as Mr. Rees Mogg said, he is opposed to that.
I mean, Joanna, I agree with you. I don't like pork barrel politics. I don't think it's good politics. I'm not convinced there's the evidence to say that it is taking place. There are a couple of newspaper stories saying it was being proposed, but I don't think this is the way British political life works, and I think it's fortunately very difficult to get through our system. Anyway, I hope this is the case, because pork barrel politics is bad politics. So
Joanna, thank you. Nigel's in Lewisham. Nigel, we move on to other areas. Go ahead. You're on the radio, Nigel.
Good morning, Mr. Rees Mogg.
Morning, Nigel.
I've noticed on 3 occasions recently that where, say, one was PMQs and Jeremy Corbyn said there'd been an increase in child poverty, and Theresa May didn't deny it, but said that absolute child poverty had reduced. The same question was asked quite separately some weeks or months later of Philip Hammond, and he said exactly the same thing, absolute child poverty. And over the weekend, one of the ministers was asked a similar question, but about pensioner poverty. He also said absolute pensioner poverty. And I wonder if you could educate me, because they're not denying that there's increase in poverty, but they are qualifying it. It seems strange. It's a new. I've not heard it before.
Well, let's see. Miss Rowe, of course, isn't responsible. I don't know that you've ever used this expression. If you have, I stand corrected. But do you understand what they mean by absolute poverty?
I understand what they mean, and actually I agree with them that there are 2 different ways of measuring poverty. There's relative poverty and there's absolute poverty. The problem with relative poverty is that it is essentially subjective and open to manipulation. You may remember, Miss Ferrari, that when Gordon Brown was in office, small increases in benefits gave people just £1 over the relative poverty line, so that the figures appeared to fall significantly, but actually an extra £1 didn't make any difference to anybody's life. Absolute poverty is a more rigorous and absolute standard, so that you know that it is a true figure rather than one open to manipulation or subjectivity. So I'm with the Chancellor and the Prime Minister on preferring to use absolute poverty. I also think that for most people, absolute poverty is what they are concerned about rather than relative poverty, because if you're concerned about relative poverty, as the whole nation gets richer, people who are much better off than they were 10 years ago may still be deemed to be relatively poor. But that isn't, in my view, a sensible judgment of poverty. It's whether It's absolute, and they can't afford the basics, which in our system, I'm glad to say, has been declining.
And are the Conservatives progressing well with their strategy here, Mr. Rees Mogg?
Well, the key to getting people out of poverty is getting people into work. And I don't think governments get people into work. I think people do it for themselves, but that if you have the incentives correctly formulated, that helps. And yes, we have record employment and the lowest unemployment since the modern form of recording unemployment was introduced in 1975. So absolutely, that's what really reduces poverty, is helping people to get good jobs.
Although some of my listeners might look at some members of the Cabinet and see a collection of millionaires, if not multimillionaires, and question what on earth would these people ever know about poverty, whether it's absolute or any other term you might choose to use.
Well, I think having people who've been successful in business in the higher reaches of politics is a thoroughly good thing, because
Donald Trump?
They're likely to have employed people and have some understanding of what business needs.
And Donald Trump comes into that category?
Donald Trump knows about business. Donald Trump is a businessman, and Donald Trump has done some things well. His tax reforms were transformative for the US economy, gave a great boost to
it's
the US
not a
economy.
natural, always a great, cosy fit, though, is it? Just because you've been a really successful business person.
That's true. Not all businessmen go successfully into politics. That's true.
Thank you for that, Nigel. Chris in Sutton. Chris, you're on the radio. Go ahead.
Good morning, Nick. Morning, Mr. Rees Mogg.
Good morning, Chris.
I heard you mention politics.
Sorry, say that again. The line clicked. Start your question again. You heard Jacob Rees Mogg mention.
I heard, he mentioned pork barrel politics.
Yeah.
We've long suspected amongst myself and my peers that the reason most MPs and peers are against Brexit is because it will hit their pockets. And I think there's a nice little drink in it. And then I read this morning that people like Lord Heseltine, several others, have been named as receiving hundreds of thousands of pounds towards the upkeep of their estates from the EU. I mean, aren't we asking MPs to vote for something that, well, basically we're asking the pigs if they'd like a smaller trough, aren't we?
This is a story put together by the Friends of the Earth, published in The Guardian. Dozens of MPs and peers, including some with considerable inherited wealth, own or manage farms that collectively received, as you rightly said, Chris, millions of pounds in EU subsidies. 48 parliamentarians claiming a total of around 5.7 million under the EU's Common Agricultural Policy in 2017. Jacob Rees Mogg.
Well, I think the Common Agricultural Policy is one of the failures of the European Union, that it doesn't spend taxpayers' money well and is designed to support continental farmers more than British farmers. It is our money in the first place. It's UK money channeled through the European Union, with the European Union taking a large cut. So I'm not a supporter of the Common Agricultural Policy, which I don't think helps farmers or taxpayers. I think actually somebody like Lord Heseltine is completely honest. I don't think he is in any sense biddable. Now, I don't agree with him on the European issue, but I think it would be hard to find a more honest man in politics. I don't think that's true of everybody. I do think that there are some in the House of Lords who benefit significantly from the European Union and have essentially been bought into the European system. But Lord Heseltine, I would not include in that category.
Thanks for that, Chris. Carlos in West Norwood. Carlos, you're on the radio.
Good morning, Nick.
Hello, sir.
I would like to ask one quick question to Jacob. So, what do you think about Jeremy Corbyn's response to the Maduro's regime, and in terms he's inviting to the dialogue and he's kind of giving time to a dictator to stay in power for, those guys have been in power for 20 years.
Yes.
With his response invited to dialogue, he's trying to give him more time to keep killing his people in his own country.
Carlos, no, thank you for calling. I think you raised such an important point, and the tragedy of Venezuela is a warning of what happens when you elect the hard left, that the hard left are so obsessed by their ideology that it allows them to have dictatorships, it allows them to impoverish their countries, it allows them to ruin people's livelihoods, and they believe this is worth doing because of their fundamental thought that the end justifies the means. And Carlos, I feel you're right to highlight Jeremy Corbyn's previous and well-established support for Venezuela, and his failure now to criticise a regime that is dictatorial and illegitimate.
Do you go, Carlos, thank you, 9 minutes after 9, so 20 minutes ago, Jeremy Hunt, I just remind everybody, of course, the Foreign Secretary, tweeted the following, Jacob Rees-Mogg. Nicolas Maduro has not called presidential elections within 8-day limit we have set. So UK, alongside European allies, now recognises Juan Guaido as interim constitutional president until credible elections can be held. Let's hope this takes us closer to ending humanitarian crisis, is the tweet from Jeremy Hunt. Is he right?
Yes, I think he is right. I think it is the right approach to be taking, but we shouldn't exaggerate Britain's ability to influence events in Venezuela, that they won't be determined by the Foreign Secretary, that Jeremy Hunt isn't Palmerston. What the Americans are doing is probably of greater significance, and they are doing the same thing. And what is happening in the region, the region seems to be quite divided, and what America does in the region doesn't always work because there is some jealousy towards the United States, inevitably, from the poorer countries in Southern America. So, yes, he's right to do it, but don't overstate the importance and the direct effect it will have. It's helpful, but it's not transformative. What the US does is potentially transformative.
Carlos, thank you for that. I know we're coming to the end of the time. Next time we'll meet, it's probably we can count in 30-something the number of days before Britain is scheduled to Brexit. And acknowledging that Michael Portillo has said that anyone who says they know what's going to happen regarding this process is either deluded or drunk or possibly a bit of both. Where might we find ourselves if the PM comes back from Brussels without any real credible move forward? Do we look again at a delay, an extension of Article 50? What happens, Jacob Rees-Mogg?
I think Michael Portillo is right, and I think being on the source at 9:30 in the morning is generally a mistake. I think delay is a proxy for stopping, and that is being proposed by people who never liked Brexit in the first place and are seeking to prevent it taking place. So delay is code for stopping, and all your listeners should be aware of that. If we can't get any deal, we have to leave without a deal. But part of the reason I've been in discussions...
The experience crash out, of course, is what people use, Mr. Rees-Mogg.
Yes, but that's a pejorative term to try and make people fear. And the Project Fear has got so bizarre that the Queen is now going to be helicoptered out of Buckingham Palace and moved to a disused bunker in Wiltshire or whatever.
Yes.
I mean,
presumably over the 12,000 people who've died because we haven't got lettuce. Let's not forget that.
Well, the absence of lettuce is supposed to be terribly sad.
Yeah.
So that's all got really silly. But sensible people have concerns about leaving without any arrangement. And as I say, that's why I'm working with Kit Malthouse, Nicky Morgan and so on, to try and find a way of having a way of doing some limited deal that ensures the smoothness of the transition. And that's where I think there may be some element of compromise. If the EU refuses to accept the change to the backstop, then say, well, look, the next stage is to have a limited deal where we continue to make contributions, we, over that period, negotiate our future relationship, and that we have no sudden break in the relationship, which may raise issues that I haven't thought of and possibly even you haven't thought of. Though that seems very unlikely.
Between the two of us, it can't be true. Jacob Rees-Mogg, thank you for joining me in the studio. Of course, Conservative MP for North East Somerset, one of the team sheet, on the team sheet of LBC here as well, of course, on Friday evenings, where LBC News at 9:32 is next.
Jacob Rees-Mogg has told LBC Brexit is far from being the primary reason for Nissan's decision not to build the new X-Trail model at Sunderland.